Thanks for the clicker. First of all, it's really wonderful to have you guys here. This is the 5th InfluxDays that we've done. And so our current cadence is we do one in San Francisco, we do one in New York, and we do one in London. This is the second one in London. And our European events are usually the strongest events, which is really interesting and really great. And it's great to have you all here. And I can't tell you, so in the back of the room are a bunch of Influx employees who some have come over from America and some who are based here in Europe. And these events are really wonderful for us. One is we draw a tremendous amount of energy from you guys. And that drives us to do better and better things, hopefully, grow the business, grow the platform, grow the open source capability and all those sorts of things. So I really, really appreciate you guys coming. So welcome. I hope it's a great day for you. And please don't hesitate to pigeonhole any of us who are wearing Influx badges. Ask us questions, challenge us, give us ideas. So let's start with, I want to thank, none of this happens without the people who contribute to the code. And obviously, it's not a requirement to be part of the community to contribute to the code, but it's a great thing. And those of you who have done it and continue to do it, we are super, super thankful. Lots of the reach that we have with the platform, the capability comes from contributed code. So thanks for playing with it. Thanks for trying it. Thanks for building on it. Thanks for deploying it. Thank you for everything associated with it. So I also, before we get started today, I wanted to thank our sponsors. So our partners in open source crime, the Grafana folks are here, and please go see them at the table outside. As most of you know, Grafana is a visualization layer that works really well with Influx. The Lenses folks who are focused on monitoring Kafka and a variety of different capabilities. And the NTOP folks are network management, and that's just a please take time to go out and see them during the break and talk to those folks. And we really appreciate their sponsorship. So let's talk. My role here is to really give you a sense of the company, what we're about, who we are as people, so that you can associate with the product and the technology, sort of the people behind it. But let me give you a sense of scale first, because I joined 3.5 years ago, and at the time we had roughly 5,000 sites running Influx around the world. Today we're at 230,000 sites running it around the world in some way, shape, or form, which is really exciting for us. There are 210 plus Telegraph plugins out there to connect us to a variety. That doesn't include the custom ones that aren't up on GitHub. And I think, somebody will correct me if I'm not, roughly 50% of those are contributed by the community, which gives the project velocity. And Telegraph is probably our most successful open source product, ironically, not the DB, which is interesting because it applies. Microsoft uses it, Datadog uses it, a variety of other people who either compete with us or work with us use Telegraph, even independent of Influx. And so I give a lot of credit to that team. We have 600 plus customers out there who are using our technology. And we have 140 employees and growing fast. And so while this is not an advertisement, we are hiring. So if you have friends, if you have people, 60% of our company works remotely. There is an office in San Francisco, and there's an office in Austin, Texas. But mostly what we want is people who are willing to work remotely all over the world. So we have a number of employees here in the UK, in Italy, across Europe, across the US. And we're very open to that model. And so I'm not trying to recruit here, but if you have friends folks who are interested in working with Influx and this platform, that would be awesome. So let's jump into it a little bit. So all of this starts with technology, and I don't need to tell you, I don't need to go through the founding story, but Paul, who's coming up next, had a very simple idea that the way people were working with time series was just really problematic. There's lots of time series implementations out there built on existing database and existing platforms. And he had a view. As all really great entrepreneurs, they have a point of view. And that's why businesses get started. He had a point of view that this could be done dramatically better and dramatically more, dramatically simpler. And so that starts with our brand about time to awesome. The objective here is always, can a developer get up and running with Influx, understand the data model, and build something relatively quickly? And from technology comes community. And community is the fundamental basis for the company, right? There are contributors, but there's also the broader community around Influx, which is now, even at a minimum, is those 230,000 sites, but a lot of different people around the world, and virtually, even if you're new to the product, you by nature are involved in our community, and there are a bunch of ways to engage in that community, and we'll talk about that later, but that's the vibrancy of the community is critical, and I'll talk about that more in a second. The third is the company, which is what I'd like to talk about today. So what's behind Influx? What's behind the technology? What's behind the capability? What's behind the product? The product is an output of those three capabilities, right? It is something that naturally comes, right? Whether it's the OS product, the enterprise product, the cloud product, it is an output of the three factors in there. And community is probably the largest factor in all of that. My role here today is to talk to you a little about the company so you know who we are, what's behind this, how we think about the world. And if you know those things, you're generally going to get a good sense of where this is going. So let's talk about, first of all, we're about builders, right? The way it sits today, we're not designed to give you a complete product that you just zip in, put in, you're done. We're oriented towards people who want to build things on our platform. And our idea is that you're able to work with the platform in a very efficient manner, and you're able to build something relatively quickly that's useful, and you're able to follow that journey over time by keep adding as you have capabilities. And so our role here is to be a platform for you to collect those metrics and events, for observability, for monitoring, for those capabilities, right, that are driven by time-related factors. And we want to build stuff that builders can use, right? And so that in very quick fashion, you can assemble a solution that is dramatically more flexible and more performant than something you could buy out of the box. And ideally, less expensive, and in some cases, free. If the open source works for you, free. And we just hope that you would contribute to the community as you use the free stuff. So first of all, so we're about builders. Secondly is, one of our core values is humility. You cannot build open source software if you weren't humble starting it, and Paul can talk to this more than I can, if you weren't humble starting an open source project, you're humble by the time you're a little bit into it. You come up with a great idea, and everybody in the world has opinions, everybody in the world has ideas. And if you can find a way to stay open, to have a beginner's mind, to collect those ideas, and let your product evolve naturally as you sift through, work through them, try to do that, which is really where Influx is today, that's an incredible capability. And so the way we think about it is our only competitive advantage is our ability to learn quickly. And who we learn from is the people in our community, right? The people who are using it, the people who are deploying it. So humility is a core. If you hear arrogance in us, call it out. That's not our style. That's not who we are. That's not who we want to be. Third thing, velocity. We think, like many things in the world, things are either growing or they're dying. And so, and to put it very simply, and Paul put it, we want to have a project with velocity. And as you'll see over the course of the day, that we're trying to push the edges of this, whether it's the new language Flux, whether it's the cloud native platform in Cloud 2.0, whether it's the next generation of enterprise products, we want to be pushing the edge. We want you to feel like, both in the open source and in the other models, that you're seeing us constantly working on the platform. Now, obviously, we have investors who've caused us to hire more developers, and so we want to do that. But mostly, we want you to evidence that we're trying to push the edges, that we're not standing pat. And the reason we want a project with velocity is because in our ideal world, you guys as builders develop a capability built around Influx that you can take from opportunity to opportunity, job to job, platform to platform, in which you become experts in working with time series data, metrics at scale, observability, and you feel like you have something in Influx that you can keep going. And that thing isn't static. It wasn't the thing we built 5 years ago that you developed expertise was. It was the API that keeps evolving so that your capability, your skills as builders, you can leverage that wherever you go, whatever project, whether it's personal, professional, or however you deploy it, you can bring that with you. That's our ideal. You can only do that if we're not static. And we're committed to a project with velocity. Growth is core to our ideal. Not lastly, but we're also committed to open source. Obviously, open source, almost all of our code is open source. We're committed to that world. Increasingly, the way we monetize is people run our stuff in the cloud, and they pay us to run it for it. But open source, the idea is any developer should be able to use Influx, can handle easily a couple of million points a second, and start working and build any project, all its capabilities, right? Whether it's the new languages in Flux, whether it's Telegraph, whether it's Chronograph, whether it's working with other platforms or things like that. All of that is available. Any developer should be able to build anything. And I talk to a lot of folks who are using Influx at home for things like monitoring their smart homes and their own capabilities. And we really encourage that. And the last point I make about the company, because it's super important to us, is those of you who haven't signed up for the cloud beta, it's free. Anybody can use it. It is rate limited for now, and shortly will be open to the world to people who want to put more stuff on it. But those of you know we've been on a tremendous journey over the last year and a half to take our open source tech stack and turn it into a cloud native service, right? Which you can consume as a utility. So you don't have to have servers. You can have an elastic utility that'll grow as you grow. You can, if you know the API, you can put your data in, you can work it. This has been a tremendous project for us. So any feedback you can give us about that is going to be awesome. And we encourage you to use it. If you use it at home, work, whatever it is, it's available. Sign up, play with it, give us feedback. But in terms of, Paul will talk more about the future of the platform and the technology, which is obviously super important to everybody here. But what I want you to understand is we have a view about the market today that if you're going to be an open source company, that there is a diamond level of being an open source company to be successful. And in order to do it, you have to have, we believe, you have to check 4 major boxes, and they're non-trivial from a code, technology, deployment. One is you have to be open source, right? We think that's really important in any infrastructure project going forward. 2 is you have to be able to run on-prem. People have to be able to use it how they want it, and some people want to run it in their own cloud, some people want to run it on their on-prem. So being cloud only is somewhat problematic, we think. Somewhat problematic, especially as we deal with our large financial customers, government customers, and things like that. The third is you have to be cloud, and I'd say cloud native. So today, the way we run Influx Cloud is we run a database as a service for you guys. And so a bunch of you are customers who are here today, we run that database as a service. We think state of the art is running it as a utility, right? Not as a managed database, where you can basically consume it in a multi-tenant fashion and use the API and scale and shrink and scale as you need it for your capabilities, right? Something much more flexible than just hosting a database for you. So we think that's critical. And then the fourth is it needs to be multi-cloud, right? It's not enough to be sitting on one cloud. Many people are going to want to consume it in different places. They're going to want to have capabilities. They're going to want to have some failover capability to multi-cloud. We think it has to be multi-cloud native. And so that's the journey we're on. We think it's a diamond level. We think the best open source companies are delivering in that way over time. And that's our objective, and that's where we're headed. So let me talk a little bit about, before I turn it over, about why time. So as I said earlier, Paul had that point of view that entrepreneurs need to have in order to develop something that's interesting. They have to believe that something's existing, broken, or there's some big opportunity in the market. And Paul's view was the way people were working with time series data was really antiquated, problematic, and didn't meet the requirements that were coming down the road. But the important point of all that was not just that the way they were working at time, but why time was relevant. So when I first met Paul and he said he was doing time series databases, I was like, time series databases, the market for that is, are you a scientist or are you a trader on Wall Street? What other market for it is there, in my naive sensibility? And what I realized is that essentially time is increasingly the lingua franca of compute. And so our view is the majority of data sets are best understood in the dimension of time. As you think about whether you're running a DevOps infrastructure, whether you're running sensors, that the lingua franca for these things are in fact time. If you do root cause analysis, the first thing you want to look at is time, what happened in time. If you want to measure the performance in the physical world, you want to look at time. If you want to look at healthcare, you want to look at time, right? So time becomes an incredibly critical factor. And only in the last 4 or 5 years have there really been a big investment in specialized platforms to deal with time. And right now, we're in a good place. We built a community. We're doing it. But we, as I said, we do not feel any comfort. We don't feel like we're resting on our laurels. That we need to keep building stuff. We need to keep adding to make people more capable. So why time? So fundamentally, we believe that there's 2 things going on in the world. There's what I call the sensification of the physical world. As I look at my watch, my Apple Watch, it has God knows how many sensors and readings on it. As I look at my car, my home, the industrial world, healthcare, a variety of things. What we're seeing is the physical world and the world of software and the world of communication are getting bonded increasingly. And I think this is obvious to all of us. Sensors are getting cheap. They're widely available. Many of you are in IoT. But sensors aren't just for the physical world. They're also for the virtual world. As we move to this next generation of, let's call it cloud computing or even cloud native computing, what we're seeing is there's no there in the way they used to be. So if you started in this industry 25 years ago, you were happy with an X Windows server and a Unix box at the back end, and that was your application and that was your set. Today, you've got containers, microservices, VMs, virtual networks. You've got applications that are composed of many different distributed services. The idea of instrumenting that has changed dramatically. If 20 years ago you would have bought Computer Associates or Tivoli or a product like that to monitor all that stuff, that is not what's going on now, right? What's going on now is you have a very complex set of software services that are also emitting and spitting out data. All of that is best understood, our view, in the concept of time. And I don't think it's much of a stretch for the audience here to say that, because most of you guys are involved in work like that. Time, observability, real time, what's happening with my systems. So time series functionally equals instrumentation in this world, right? Both of these systems, whether it's a physical world or the virtual world, the language they speak is the language of time. And so our view is, and a good way to think about that is that instrumentation drives autonomy. What we're all trying to do is make our systems smarter over time, automate them, things like that. It's not good enough to see things, to observe them, to be visible. It's only useful if you can see things to then automate them, to figure out how to increasingly make them operate self-healing, right? And if you think about something like a self-driving car, what do? You instrument, you observe, you learn, you build a control loop that automates it, and if you do that, let's call it 5 million times, you get a self-driving car, right? But if you do that, but the point is, the systems that you folks are running and the systems you folks are building, they are not static. You don't buy a product and then it works and it's all fine, right? That's not the world the way it is you build a system, you're building maybe in a CI/CD environment, you roll out new software, you observe that in real time, you build a control loop, and your systems get smarter all the time. The work of DevOps and the work in IoT is that work around automation, about control loops, right? And so the process of seeing your systems behave in real time is critical, because a priori these systems are getting so complex that the thought that you know how they're going to behave until you watch them is an old thought. You cannot predict how these complex systems are going to behave. So that instrumentation is an ongoing process. It is not a fixed process. And our belief is that instrumentation drives autonomy, and we want to be the platform for collecting all that data to make sense of it. And so as you think about what's happening in the world, the evolving landscape is, first of all, we've moved from these I don't know how many people are coming from traditional enterprises, but it's very common to have 35 different monitoring tools. I bought HP OpenView or Cisco Works to monitor my network, or maybe I bought some new one. I bought something else. I bought 3 different tools, whether it was New Relic or Dynatrace to do my APM. I have monitoring for my VM. I have monitoring for my server. I have monitoring for my network. The state of the art is not those things, right? The state of the art is the idea is that I'm running a service in which people are consuming that service in some sort of way. I want one view across all layers of that. That full stack monitoring is some of what's driving both the adoption of the open source and the adoption of our product. And we think that's state of the art going forward, full stack monitoring. The idea is I have a service, I can see a bunch of dashboards, or I can see increasingly a bunch of AI and ML on top of stuff in which I am building control loops that make my service whole, not that make my network whole, or my server whole, or my VM whole, or my microservice whole, but that I can see my service, that service orientation. Secondly is we see increasingly a metrics-first approach. As you see more and more companies build what they're calling, used to call monitoring teams, and now they're calling observability teams. And I think the primary difference was the tool set for monitoring teams were likely just, basically we're collecting a bunch of logs. We index them and then we show some data. The tool set for observability teams is in fact real-time data, so that you're watching your systems behave in real time. That's where we think this is going, is this orientations from monitoring, right, the fixed old idea static, to observability. And we think metrics are the drive of that, and then monitoring to observability being the core of this sort of stuff. So we think these trends are driving the market. They force our hand. They cause us to continually evolve the product. But we do feel like this is the right platform to build on. And so we do have that point of view today, 6 years later, after the Influx project was started. So before I introduce Paul, what I want to talk about is the future. I've already laid out some of those factors. That's the notion of what a diamond level open source company is, what products are available, what open source are available. You already see we've made a big investment in Flux and the new language. We've made a big investment in our 2.0 version of the open source. That is out there. Hopefully it's in alpha, that people are playing with it, and we'll continue to evolve that. We're not ready, we're not close to ready to GAing it, but you can watch it evolve and that's our time. And those of you in the room who have given us feedback on it, we really appreciate it. But if we're going to be successful as a company, this platform, coming back to you guys, this platform has to be something you feel like you can use in a variety of different situations. You can take with you that this API is powerful, that your skill and knowledge and your familiarity with it actually helps drive portions of your career. That's where we want to go. If you guys are successful as builders, we'll be successful. The rest will just work out. And that's our focus, that's our attention. In order to have that, we need to have that ability to learn. And so this is a great opportunity for us. We'll share some ideas with you today. Hopefully during the break, you'll grab somebody and you'll say, have you guys thought of this? Have you done this? Have you done that? Don't be afraid to be critical. We're very critical of each other, so it's very direct. But we love your feedback. So with that, I want to introduce my partner.